reaction to that first, because we've already turned this into a hot political issue, Lee?
Well, I think all of us here, obviously, I'd completely concur with Celine and David in saying it's a sad day for America when this has to happen. However, the unfortunate part of this that I think is going to happen, and I hope I'm not getting a view of that already, is what happened with Oklahoma, and that is in not saying that this is because there are some bad people out there that are doing horrible things that don't have to do with anybody's political point of view, but have to do with some nuts on the edge. And to somehow try and attribute that to mainstream people, I'd like, David, for instance, could you clarify, you said these groups. What groups are you talking about?
I was making an obvious reference. I wasn't being elliptical about it. I was talking about the NRA. And I was talking about the incident that caused President Bush to resign from the organization.
Okay. Do you think the NRA then somehow is connected, like to the Oklahoma bombing? Is that what you're saying?
I think when you use incendiary language and you send out en masse to millions of people literature that suggests that government is the enemy and use militaristic terms, yes, I think that has an inflammatory effect.
Well, do you believe, Chris, that the president makes this decision now? Because again, this has been recommended before to the president.
Spending practices of the government now, principally the Democratic Congress, which fortunately has been turned over now, we're bringing that under tow, and hopefully they will have the courage in Washington to overcome this. But it's not going to be overcome if we keep talking about this thing, the Democrats this week on the floor of Congress, the pictures of the old people. Oh, we're hurting the old people. What we've got to worry about is hurting the future generations and destroying this country economically.
I think it behooves us to remember that it was under 12 years of Republican presidencies that the national debt quadrupled. Not one
budgets passed by the
neither not Ronald Reagan nor George Bush ever submitted a balanced budget to the United States
David,
Congress.
Why do we want to talk about the past? Well, and if you want to talk about, let's refer to the last 40 years of legislative oversight by the Democratic Party. Last time I looked at the way Congress runs, that all spending bills are generated from the House of Representatives, and for 40 years the Democrats controlled the spending practices, and those legislatively have to be voted by.
You know, because you mentioned that you've spent much of your life in Washington, D.C., so you know how the process works.
That's right.
The President of the United States submits budgets. The Republican presidents submitted budgets for 12 years unbalanced, and this whole spiraling deficit situation began in 1981 when Ronald Reagan told us that we could drastically cut taxes, increase spending, and balance the budget at the same time, and it didn't add up. George Bush called it voodoo, and now we're into voodoo too.
And where were the Democrats during all this debate, David? What were they doing?
Trying to moderate that.
And where did all these programs? Where did the programs come
from? I regret that we lost that fight. We said it was wrong. We lost that fight, and now the country.
You were in charge.
Ronald Reagan was president of the United States. We were not in charge.
What about
Tip O'Neill? What about the House?
What about
Don't abdicate your responsibility. That's what Democrats love to do. Abdicate
ladies and gentlemen,
this is an extraordinary
thing. Back to your corners. Let's go to John, listening to us on WLS. Axelrod, you were quizzing Lee Newcomb on why the cut in the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is part of the family.
No, he made a point. Right. He made a point. He said that the cut of public broadcasting was part of the family contract because families have to pay too much taxes and they shouldn't have to support money-making enterprises like that. And I think we may agree on something because I know a lot of people believe that we ought to look at all these corporate subsidies that we have at the federal level, agricultural subsidies, for example, for entities like Archer Daniels Midland down your way, and subsidies for the handful of people who run the sugar industry in this country and so on, and all kinds of other corporate subsidies. So shouldn't we be looking at that as we look to balance the budget? Secretary Rice has said that, but there's been some resistance on the part. So maybe you guys could work your side of the aisle, and I'll work my side of the aisle on that.
We'll cut the federal government. That's good.